Great. This is Senate Government Operations Committee on Tuesday, April 23rd, and we are looking at a bill related to executive branch, judicial branch, legislative branch, and state employees appropriations, better known as the Pay Act. And we're doing it in a kind of weird order. The bill has not yet actually been officially introduced, so it doesn't have a bill number. It usually starts in the House. We are the Senate committee. This was supposed to be a joint hearing, and the House is on the House floor. And so therefore they were not able to join us in the hearing. The bill obviously is a must-pass bill because it is the pay for all state employees. And we are at that time of the session where we don't have a lot of time. So we are going to take a look and take some testimony on it, which the House committee may watch as part of their work on the bill. They may also take additional testimony. And we might take additional testimony, but this might be the only time we have to think about the bill. So I was, hopefully you have this draft 1.5 and it's on our website, and you all should have paper copies. So I'm going to just invite Jen Kirby up again. We are lucky to have Jen twice in one day. And if you want to walk us through the bill.
Sure. Hello again, Jen Kirby from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So we are looking at draft 1.5, 24-0691. It will potentially be introduced by the House GovOps Committee. That's who is listed on here. And the statement purpose is short and sweet. It proposes to enact the Pay Act for fiscal years 2025 and 2026. It's usually done in a two-year bill. And it's entitled An Act Relating to Compensation for Certain State Employees. This Pay Act starts out in section 1 by talking about the collective bargaining agreement. So a lot of this is based on what happens with the collective bargaining agreements and then how that also plays out to non-classified employees. The Act fully funds, for FY25, it fully funds the first year of the collective bargaining agreements between, and there's a few of them, the state and the Vermont State Employees Association and the state and the Vermont Troopers Association for the period from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2025, so fiscal year 25. And the collective bargaining agreements for most classified employees provide in FY25 an average 1.9% step increase and 4.5% across the board increase for a total of a 6.4% increase. For FY26, it has the same language, but for the period from July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026. And in this case, the collective bargaining agreements for most classified employees provide in FY26 an average, again, 1.9% step increase and 3.5% across the board increase for a total of a 5.4% increase. So 6.4% in FY25, 5.4% in FY26. So that is the collective bargaining agreements. For exempt employees, for FY25, this language allows, and this is really fairly standard language that's just updated for each path. The executive, judicial, and legislative branches may extend the FY25 provisions of the collective bargaining agreements funded by the Act to employees not covered by the bargaining agreements as they determine to be appropriate and in accordance with the appropriations provided to each branch in the budget. For FY26, same thing, the three branches may extend the provisions of the collective bargaining agreements to non-covered employees as appropriate and within available appropriations, or the amounts appropriated. Section 3, for purposes of determining annual salary adjustments, special salary increases and bonuses under specific statutory provisions. There's this term you'll see show up later, the average rate of adjustment available to most classified employees under the collective bargaining agreement. And that is shorthand or longhand for 6.4%, but it's what it means is to 6.4% in FY25 and the 5.4% in FY26. All right, so then we get into updating
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understand what that, because what that means is that in section 3, it's applying the 6.4 and the 5.4 respectively to the non-bargaining executive branch.
I think literally in this piece, what it means is, yes, because it's saying for purposes of the way the language is used in the statutes, we're talking about 6.4% for FY 25 and 5.4% for FY 26.
But that wasn't bargained because these are not
These are
part of
exempt,
bargaining.
right, these are exempt or otherwise employees who are outside of the collective bargaining agreements. Then we get to several sections that update the statutory salary amounts for FY 25 and 26. So you'll see starting in the top of page 4, it's striking through the existing statutes that show annual salaries as of July 3rd, 2022. So the first day of the pay period in FY 23 and the first day of the pay period in FY 24 are struck. And we've got the new first days of the pay period, which are pretty late into July for FY 25 and 26. And so the amounts that were provided to me by DHR, I believe, go up by the 6.4 and 5.4%. Cheryl for confirmation. So yes, so that is what is reflected in there. And there is existing statutory language that talks about there can be salaries can be up to 50% above the base salary. So there is a maximum that is higher than what is here. And then we get into on pages 5, 6, 7, we get into the secretaries and the secretaries and commissioners, and again, updating their base salaries as of the beginning for pay periods of FY 25 and 26 by that same 6.4 and 5.4. Not otherwise making changes to those statutes. On page 9, you can certainly look at any of the numbers you want, but otherwise just know that they're increased from what has been in the statute. It was increased in the last pay act. So starting on page 9, we have the judicial branch and the statutory salaries. So we've got the chief justice, the associate justices, administrative judge, superior judges, magistrates, and judicial bureau hearing officers. And again, updating those statutory amounts for their salaries. In section 6, the assistant judges are entitled to receive compensation at the daily amount. And so those amounts are just like we have in the columns, except written out in paragraph form. For updating those amounts. Section 7, we have the probate judges. There are some differing amounts by county based on likely on the volume of the work that they are encountering. And so those amounts are updated accordingly. On page 12, section 8, as the sheriffs, the sheriff of Chittenden County has a higher salary than the sheriffs of all the other counties, so it's separated out into sheriffs of all counties except Chittenden, and then sheriff of Chittenden County. Section 9, state's attorneys, been updating on a county by county basis. Those amounts.
Oh, yes, I want
Thank you. Can you just explain again why the Chittenden County Sheriff is called out separately?
It's a higher amount, which, again, I will defer to others. I would assume based on just the number of people and occurrences of events and the number of staff necessary to supervise, that has been.
Okay, well, the percent changes are the same.
Percent changes are the same, right, but the gap between goes up slightly. So.
For the state's attorneys, and this one's like maybe they're later in the bill, I know some of our state's attorneys are part-time. Is the salary that you saw somewhere else that the salary was reduced if the person was in a part-time position? Is that true for state's attorneys as well, or is this the salary regardless of whether or not it's a part-time?
I'm gonna defer to HR folks on that. I do see lower amounts for a couple of them, but I'm not familiar with which positions are actually part-time.
Grand Valley.
Right.
There.
Right. So that would be my assumption, but the part-time nature may be based on the volume of the work that is required in those committees, and so that's, that may be what has made the positions part-time if they're part-time, because they're not sufficient volume for full-time, but I don't have personal experience in any of that, so I will refer to. All right, and then finally we get to the appropriations in section 10, starting at the bottom of page 14. So for the executive branch, the first and second years of the 2-year agreements between the state and the Vermont State Employees Association for the Defender General Non-Management Supervisory and Corrections Bargaining Units, and for purposes of appropriation, the state's attorney's office's bargaining unit for the period of FY 25 and 26. So from July 1st, 2024 through June 30th, 2026, the collective bargaining agreement with the Vermont Troopers Association for that same period, and salary increases for employees in the executive branch not covered by the bargaining agreements are funded as follows here. And so we have for FY 25 an amount of $27,279,337 appropriated from the general fund to the Secretary of Administration for distributions to departments to fund the FY 25 collective bargaining agreements and the requirements of this act. There's also some amount of transportation fund, 2.5 million appropriated from the transportation fund to the Secretary of Administration for distribution to the Agency of Transportation and Department of Public Safety to fund, again, the FY 25 collective bargaining agreements and requirements of this act. And then other funds direct the administration to provide additional spending authority to departments through existing processes of excess receipts to fund the 2025 agreements and requirements of the act. The estimated amounts are $25,627,057 from a special fund, federal funds, and other sources.
Okay.
And then we have transfers. So with due regard to the possible availability of other funds for FY 25, the Secretary of Administration is authorized to transfer the various appropriations and various funds, and from the receipts of the Liquor Control Board, such sums as the Secretary determines necessary to carry out the purposes of this act to the various agencies supported by state funds. And then the whole thing plays out again for FY 26 with differing amounts. So from the general fund, we have $24,644,442 appropriated to the Secretary of Administration, $3 million from the transportation fund, additional spending authority through excess receipts, in estimated amounts of $27,868,854 from special fund, federal funds, and other sources. And again, the authority to transfer from appropriations funds and receipts of the Liquor Control Board as needed to carry out the purposes of this act. And this section shall include sufficient funding to ensure administration of exempt pay plans authorized under provision in Title 32. So that's all executive branch. We have the judicial branch, and starts with an extension to non-covered employees that authorizes the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court to extend the provisions of the judiciary's collective bargaining agreement to judiciary employees not covered by that agreement. In FY 25, we have the 2-year agreements between the state and the Vermont State Employees Association for the judicial bargaining unit for the period of FY 25, and salary increases for employees in the branch not covered by the bargaining agreements are as follows. $2,470,963 is appropriated from the general fund, and $185,986 from other sources to fund the FY 25 collective bargaining agreement and requirements of this act. For FY 26, the appropriation is $2,388,783 from the general fund and $179,871 from other sources to the judiciary, to the FY 26 agreement and the requirements of this act. And we have the legislative branch. So for the First, for FY 25, the General Assembly, including all legislative branch employees, is funded as follows. The amount of $884,808 is appropriated from the general fund to the legislative branch. And for the period of July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026, the General Assembly refunded with $758,613 from the general fund. And it's for the increase. And the effective date is July 1st.
So Jen, that only pays for 8 feet, so I assume.
I think that is just the increase.
So that's just the increase, right?
I'm looking at Catherine, but.
Catherine, that's just the increase in salaries.
The eight
for the
hundred and something for the
legislature.
legislature. And
That's fair, yes, just as increase, yes.
That's just the increase, I was gonna say that,
Base.
otherwise that pays for 8
Right,
feet.
the base is already.
Right.
uh,
Okay,
in our-
great,
That's right.
And, sorry, just let me follow up, is that true for all?
Yes.
It's just the
So those
increase of
numbers
the
are just-
27 million to the executive branch, is that just the increase?
Yes, because the budget has to be, everything is built into.
Right, got it, thanks. Thank you, except for the salaries, which were explicitly called out as salaries. That's not an increase, those are just straight salaries.
Those are their salary amounts, but the money in the appropriations provision just reflects the increase. So the numbers themselves are the whole number that the person's salary is in the column. Columns are the person's whole salary, but it's not appropriating it, it's just specifying what their salary is, and it's the appropriation that has
Right.
piece in the base.
Thanks,
In the
I was,
budget.
thank you.
All right, Senator Watson.
Thank you. I'm sure this is probably boilerplate language because you do this all the time. I'm wondering if just for the sake of clarity, I mean, what I am understanding from the pay increases is that the 6.4% is from just the prior year. And that the 5.4% is from the how do I?
Year over year.
It's right, it's year over year, as opposed to like, you're calculating 6.4% and 5.4% from the same base.
Right,
Does that make
no,
sense?
right, I believe it is 6.4% applied
Right,
and then 5.4% of that combined number.
and no one would, and especially because we've specified like the actual values in here, no one would interpret that as being calculated from the same number
I don't believe so, because I think it's the whole systems are built on doing that.
on the year over year. Okay, I just want to make sure that it was clear.
Any other questions for Ben?
And to be clear, because it's not explicit in here, but because the increases for members of the General Assembly are tied to the increases for the constitutional officers. Your
Yeah,
salaries would go up by the same percentages that are in here.
we did that explicitly 2 or 4 years ago, we trued it up.
Something like that,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly, something, you're not listed specifically, but.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Catherine, do you want to come up
I
and
don't
just say the thing,
think-
or I will ask you, is the money in the budget for this?
Yes.
Okay,
And you will see it in D 104 in the version on the Senate agenda. It's just the big picture appropriation number.
Yeah.
Not these details.
okay. Yes, I checked as soon as I got this. So the money is in the bill, in the budget bill, but the language is not. So, that's, and there's still a conversation about how it will travel, the language part will travel. Commissioner, Cindy, you want to come up?
Sure. And actually, I've got,
You have a crew with
I have
you?
a crew.
Do you want to bring your crew
I would
up?
like to bring my crew.
Okay, as long as you all can fit and there are chairs, you're welcome to move the furniture. Well, the chairs, part of the
Do
furniture.
you guys
We tried to move this table.
They're so,
around.
so
You should just leave us here.
All right.
Oh, because it's a
I think it's like,
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna go.
But we can.
That was going on.
Oh, good.
Are you guys not gonna go up?
No, we're
Is that your boss?
Well, we're supporters from here.
Okay.
It gets crowded over there.
You'll talk about it.
For details.
Okay, so, all right, everyone, let's get back in it. do you want to introduce yourself and have your team introduce themselves so we know who everybody is in case they chime in?
I would be delighted to. I am Beth Bastici. I am the Commissioner of the Department of Human Resources. And with me is John Berard. He is our Director of Labor Relations. So he negotiates the collective bargaining agreements on behalf of the administration. And then Harold Schwartz is the Director of Operations. And he's our money guy in this, in this situation.
And so I think we'll introduce ourselves,
Great.
You've been in here before, and Everett, you have, but not sure you have. So I'm Senator Ruth Hardy. I represent the Addison District.
I'm Olivia Parker, I'm the committee assistant.
Senator Tanya Lihovsky, I represent the Chittenden Central District.
Hi, I'm Rebecca White and I represent the Windsor County District. I'm one of three.
Hey, Bob Norris, I represent Franklin and the town of Elberg in the county of Grand Island.
Senator Ann Watson for the Washington District.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District.
There you go. There's us. We know you now, and you want to just tell us what you'd like us to know?
So our testimony today is to ask you to support the funding for the Pay Act. This funds the pay and benefits of the collective bargaining agreements, the fiscal year 25 and 26, as well as funding the parameters of that and the treatment for employees that are not covered by the collective bargaining agreements. So that's our request. And then we put together some highlights of the collective bargaining agreements. This is not a complete agreement. And also I put on we did submit paperwork, and you can link to the current collective bargaining agreements. They're each like they're very big tomes. And there are also some changes that we have bargained for, changing the agreements that I didn't put on the list, but these are the ones that are kind of the highlights. So if you wanted, I can go through those or
Yeah, that would be great. And maybe sort of what the process is
Sure.
that you use to get here for those of us who are, this is our first time going through it.
absolutely. So we
So
have.
I just want to point out that this is like one of the few points where we actually do tie the hands of a future legislator. We always say, oh, we can't commit future legislatures to doing this, but actually, in this act, we do. So every time we do that, just think about that, the Pay Act.
You can still undo it.
Yeah, but we don't.
And in statute, there are dates and deadlines related to collective bargaining, so that by the time we're here and at this point, there is something to provide to you so that you can appropriate it. So the first step is we start to bargain in the union. Our team bargains with the VSEA and the Vermont Troopers Association. With the VSEA, we bargain. My team bargains 3 of the bargaining agreements, which are the non-management, the corrections, and the supervisor bargaining units. The Defender General also has a bargaining unit, and the Defender General bargains that separately also with the VSEA. And then states attorneys and sheriffs also are represented by the VSEA, and they do that bargaining independently. And judiciary also has a bargaining unit with the VSEA one, I think, and they bargain that independently as well. And Harold actually provides a lot of the support there and provides all of the bargaining data and what different things are going to cost. So that's the first thing we do is we meet, and John and his bargaining team meet with the various unions and try to negotiate something at the table. If you can negotiate something at the table, the next step would be mediation. We would work with a federal mediator, which is free. Well, our taxes pay for that. And then, and then if we don't come to an agreement with the mediator, we can go to what's called a fact-finding process, which is kind of like a mini board hearing, right?
Non-binding
So
arbitration.
And then it's non-binding arbitration. And then we have an opportunity, once that is finished, we put our final proposals on the table, and the fact finder will choose one of those.
Oh.
And then,
Fact finder can cherry pick, so the fact finder provides a recommendation to the parties. In hopes of driving a settlement, and then there's a cooling off period after fact finding for about 2 weeks. During which the parties are supposed to reflect on what the fact finder's report was, and if we can use it as a base to reach an agreement, then we reach an agreement. If we don't reach an agreement in fact finding, and we go to what's called last best offer. So that's binding arbitration. And that goes to an actual arbitrator unless the parties agree mutually to use the Vermont Labor Relations Board. And then that's what we also call baseball arbitration, which is that arbitrator has to pick one package or the other. He can't, or she can't cherry pick. It's one or the other, and whatever one they pick, that's the one that gets costed and sent over to the legislature for appropriation. The big difference is when we reach an agreement at the table, like we did this time, the governor is obligated to fund it in his budget and obviously support it. So as opposed to an imposed contract, which just comes directly to the legislature for funding.
And that's why we hear a difference in you sitting down and saying you support it and want us to fund it. And because at this point, we're used to the opposite, where this is not in the governor's budget, so it's refreshing.
Right, we are both the VSEA and the VTA, once we haven't finalized negotiations with the VTA yet. But once we get to that point, we have a contract with them and we're obligated to support that. And if for some reason that you did not make the appropriation that was in that contract, you appropriated something else, we would actually have to go back and bargain that. But the timelines in statute are all set up so that we get to this point, we're here with you that you've got, that the legislatures can make a decision on and put in the budget.
Senator Clarkson.
So John and Beth, this was just finalized, you just finished the pay act negotiations, right? I mean, he didn't have them in time for the budget in January, did he?
So
When did you finish negotiating, I guess is my question.
we finished negotiations with VSEA in December.
So why are we just getting the pay act now with 3 weeks to go in the legislature?
I cannot answer that question, Senator.
So you've had the pay act all set for 3 months?
So I think part of it is that both the Senate and the House Government Operations Committees are new and it wasn't on their radar. And between us and the VSEA, we've talked, have you heard anything about PAC? No, have you heard anything? So no one had really heard anything about PAC. So we reached out to the committee chairs and said, hey.
That's not
Yeah.
that's not what I was told.
Okay.
I
never
Yeah, so-
initiated a pay act previous to this. It had always been kind of the legislature would reach out to us usually through lunch council. So I think that was kind of
Both Jen and I are new to this, so.
right. I think everybody was new and we're just expecting the legislature to reach out.
But I think Catherine reached out a while ago.
Yeah,
Yeah, my also understanding was there was an issue of waiting for the ratification of it.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was
That
told,
was
was that it wasn't ratified until late March, early
Ah.
April.
Right.
And that we couldn't start it until then. That's what I was under the
but then
impression.
maybe the preference is not to start it. I mean, we could still move forward into the language because the money was in the governor's budget it was in the governor's budget when the governor submitted the budget. So we have to start budgeting for this well before our negotiations are completed. So there are times when, so as I said, we're not finished with the VTA yet. But in this appropriation, there's enough money. We're confident there's enough money to cover the VTA. If there wasn't, and we still didn't last time, actually. We didn't.
We have an agreement in principle with VTA that has yet to be ratified. And I'm sorry, I answered your question literally, Senator, that we finished in December, but the collective bargaining agreements weren't ratified by the membership until February.
That helps.
Right.
I guess I would have preferred that we'd done this budget, this bill under the regular process, so it was led to believe that we had to wait until he ratified it and then but
I don't think that there's been, right, I don't know that there's definitely like a set or process on how to do the legislative part, but.
Okay,
And I'm sorry if there was miscommunication and we could have been here earlier to both sets.
I do want to add one thing, that mentioned that the governor's recommend, it did include some numbers on it. And I wasn't even paying attention to those numbers when we did all the calcs and they came in, general fund came in $1 million less than what the governor's number was
Mhm.
at that point. And I thought the capital fund.
So the budget, the Senate proposed budget carries the lower number.
Okay. Okay,
How wonderful, an extra $1 million.
are there questions for the Commissioner Senator White?
So what are we doing next year?
This is covers 2 years.
No, oh, so what are we gonna do then? Is the plan that we reach out to them or they reach out to
in
us?
2 years?
It will be in 2 years. I
Just
don't-
so I know if I still happen to be around.
I don't know. Well, I think that whoever's here in 2 years can cross that bridge.
And Harold and John, as classified employees, hopefully they'll be here in 2 years for sure, hopefully. Hopefully.
There are a lot of things that have to happen before
Yeah.
to see who's here. So,
But, you know, I guess one thing, Ruth, is that if it's in the budget, it should like show up in the budget. So we should all see it there and know it's there, even if it hasn't been ratified. Right? So the House has already dealt with it. No, it wasn't, I thought you said it wasn't in the governor's
It
budget.
was in the governor's budget, but as you're looking at the details of the collective bargaining agreement and the 4.5% across the board increase that was bargained for 2025, and then the 3.5% across the board increase, until those are ratified by the membership of the unions, those numbers aren't public. So if we had draft language prior, if we had the draft language of all the salaries that was talking about the across the board increases, which is what people think of as a COLA or a, you know, so if that wasn't in there, if that was in there, then that would be, then that would not be appropriate because the membership hadn't agreed that would, even though that might be what we bargained, the membership would have agreed.
but what you are saying is that until it's ratified, the language can't be drafted because that's basically saying, you know, like showing your hand before it's finalized. So that is what happened. It's not because
Yes.
we have new chairs or a new legislative council or a new JFO. It is because you can't actually write the language publicly until it's ratified.
That makes sense.
Okay. I just want to be clear for the record about why we're here this late in the session.
And this is not atypical for us to be here.
Oh, this is very typical.
This is normal.
Yeah.
For us to be here talking
always
about
been.
it in April and May.
Okay. Yeah, it's just, it'd be easier if we could do it earlier, so that the timing
Right.
is a little.
And sometimes
for
we
the legislative
can, so
session.
if we can get a good agreement at the table, this time we went to meeting, well, for,
The mediation for all three, and we went to fact finding for 2.
so there are times last time, we probably were, maybe not against enough.
Well, that was sooner last time.
Yeah, I think it was,
I think
but
it was-
Again, because the contracts were ratified earlier.
Yeah.
yeah.
So I remember, like, I was on House Government Operations and I remember kind of being like, where's the pay act? It feels really late, so.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
well, so Commissioner Festigi has some, sort of like bullet points on our website, just so
Yeah.
you know. And of potential interest to this committee, because we did a bill relating to it, they did, in the agreement, provide Juneteenth as a holiday, a paid holiday, but got rid of Bennington Battle Day, is that what?
Or the corrections bargaining.
Oh, just for the corrections bargaining, yes, okay.
Intriguing.
The other 2 units, we couldn't reach an agreement on.
Okay.
holidays.
Maybe next time.
This came up when we were doing the bill about Juneteenth,
Right.
about whether, and it was like, oh, it's bargained, we don't touch it in the bill, so it's just kind of
There it
interesting to see it on the list. Senator Yoski.
What happens if you can't come to an agreement on holidays?
It's part of the benefits package, so if it were such a disagreement that the parties couldn't agree on the whole deal, then we'd end up at last best offer over holiday.
Okay, so what you are saying is that is not what happened. What happened is there wasn't an agreement, so it kind of just got left to be as a part of the.
Right.
So we reached an agreement to the changes, where we provided, Indigenous Peoples' Day and Juneteenth to the corrections bargaining unit, effectively in exchange for Battle of Bennington Day.
Okay.
The other two units,
It's a good exchange.
the other two units, we couldn't reach an agreement with them on similar language. So,
But it didn't take down the whole.
but it did not take down the whole deal.
Okay.
That's correct.
That's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute, I just
No,
not
We've got,
There's no.
we have 3 agreements.
Okay.
So, the executive branch is good.
Yes, there's still holidays.
Senator Clarkson.
So I don't mean this to be snarky, but I am a little interested that you're allowed to bargain independent of the global notion, I understand from our governor, that everything has to come in at 3% as we begin to completely starve state government. So I am just curious that you guys are free from that objective, which is, I think, great. But it's interesting, everybody else is really, to all the departments are so tied, so what's tied to that 3%? Not salaries, just cost of doing business?
So so what is in the Pay Act, that's the incremental improvement. So that is, it funds for 2024, so departments' budgets were asked to keep their budgets
know,
to the 3% increase. That doesn't account the salary increases that are accounted for in Pay Act. So the Pay Act funding provides that funding to be able to do that, but it, and as well as what we call is the average value of a step, which is that 1.9%. So employees in the classified service are on a step plan, and at the beginning, early on, you get a step every year, and then it goes to every 2 years, and then towards the end, it's every 3 years. So if you're an employee and you're in a year where you're going to get a step, your raise is actually it's actually more than 1.9%. But that 1.9% accounts for the employees that don't get anything as well as the employees that are getting something. So the average value of the step is not, every classified employee is not getting 1.9%. Some are getting maybe between 3 and 4%, maybe was.
The average value of a step, if the classified service got one every year, is about 3.19%.
So they
But
move
the actual
on.
cost is
Right.
1.9, because not everybody steps every.
Got it.
So it's a weighted average.
Thank you. Yes,
So right, so and that's what that's what they're using for exempt employees, and when you look at the employees that aren't part of the collective bargaining agreement, like a lot of those employees are employees that are classified, that might be managerial or confidential employees that are not able to be part of bargaining units, or also a big portion of that is the attorneys we have in state government. They are not eligible for collective bargaining. So within the Attorney General's office or embedded in all the departments, those folks also, they would get the 1.9%. And that's the majority of the exempt employees are attorneys.
So have you talked to me a little bit about what kind of like salary studies you do for employees and how those work?
Yeah, so typical, we have one person who, Doug Pine is our director of compensation and recruiting. So when we do salary studies, he's the one that's looking at those. When we hire, for the attorneys, we actually have a pay plan, so on how to slot attorneys in for pay. There's other employees that there's not a pay plan, so we look at across state government, what other people kind of doing similar jobs are being paid, what they're paying in the external marketplace. So if the exempt employee isn't on a pay plan, those are the types of things we look at. So it's not necessarily, it's more based on when we're hiring somebody, this is what we're going to do rather than a broad-based study.
And do you use that? I mean, I noticed, and didn't know this before until Jen walked us through the bill, that, and you and I chatted about this, the maximum salary for each appointed officer shall be 50% above the base salary. Do you use that authority as part of setting the salaries?
Yes.
And do you do pay studies to try to figure out if using that authority is necessary, or how do you know when to use that authority?
The Secretary of Administration every year, once the Pay Act is approved, then the Secretary looks at how exempt employees would be treated as part of that. So for example, last time the classified service, got their across the board increase for fiscal year 24, $1,000 lump sum. Exempt employees actually didn't get the $1,000 lump sum, they just got the same across the board increase in ABI. So the Secretary of Administration kind of looks at what's happening across state government, and determines who are the exempt employees and how they might be treated accordingly. I would say that, and then the previous year with the lumps, there's a $1,500 lump sum, and then only exempt employees that were making a certain amount or less got the lump sum of $1,500, and people are thinking, I don't remember the amount, it was over. I don't remember the amount. Got that lump sum, so there is definitely that taken into place. What's all the judges and all the, the state's attorneys and all the elected officials, they are all set in statute. So that what is in statute is what we pay them unless they tell us, don't pay that much. So unless someone.
So none of these people are getting paid 50% more.
No, the only people that could get 50% more are the, when you look at the executive branch portion, it's the secretaries and the commissioners are in there. And those salaries could be, so that what you're seeing is the base salary of 100%. And then the statute, the Pay Act allows us to go up to 150, up to 50% more than that. So if it's 100,000, if the base is 100,000, we could pay up to 150,000 for that role, except for the commissioner of the Department of Health, we can pay 100% more. So if the base was 100, I could pay the commissioner of the Department of Health 200,000. Yeah, and if you look at the
So
top,
these are really the minimum salaries that they're paid. Unless they say, I want to be a martyr, if they'll pay that much.
right, typically, yeah.
Okay. And when you do the salary studies, do you look at full compensation, like our benefits package?
Yeah.
And not just the salary, that's.
Yeah. And that's for all our state, that's how, I mean, it's a challenging recruitment environment out there across the board for frontline workers, and people who are entry level, like beginning their careers, people who we're trying to hire as leaders across the industry. It's a difficult job market for employers. So, and it is difficult for us to compete on salary. So that is our value proposition for sure, is our benefits packages. We have great pension plans. We have, for classified folks, we have a defined benefits pension plan. For exempt employees, they can choose between that plan or another plan. We have, our health benefits are fantastic. So that's really a big part of our value proposition and working for the state of Vermont, and some other things we use to help recruit people for all positions across state government.
So I mean, I'm looking at on page 4, the elected officers, and just something that pops out to me is the governor's salary in 2025. Based on this year's governor's salaries, if this were to go through, he would be the second highest paid governor in the country. Assuming all the other states kept their salary the same. New York is 250,000. And everything else would be lower than that, including California. So that just strikes me as a high salary compared to the market. I mean, if you're looking at the market for governors, it's a high salary. We're the second smallest state. So I'm wondering if there's a possibility of doing some kind of market analysis on the chief executive salary and to see if it's within, I know actually the state of Maine did this recently. And they increased their governor's salary because their governor's salary is actually one of the lowest in the country. It's just looking it up here, it's $70,000 for the governor of Maine. And they did a study and increased the governor's salary in Maine because it was so low. But I don't think they increased it anywhere near. So I'm wondering if there's ever been any work done on comparing executive salaries at that level. And I know you and I chatted briefly, and you did mention the governor's mansion, and there's not a governor's mansion in Vermont, but there is a very generous employee benefits package, and so I'm wondering if there's been any work looking at that across the
Yeah.
country.
I don't know what states, housing is included in their governor's compensation package. I'm guessing those are just salaries, they aren't total compensation. I don't know what type of studies are already out there. I can imagine governor salaries are public record, which is why we probably have a list of that.
Yeah.
What else they get for benefits that, supplements that salary, I don't know. I know that the governor of Vermont gets the same benefits that regular state employees get.
Yeah, the data I'm looking at is from the Council of State Government. So they have a
Right.
great website on this. It seems, when you compare it to the pay increase that other state workers are getting and the benefit package that other state workers are getting, maybe it's not out of line, but when you compare it to what other governors are getting, it seems quite out of line.
Right, and looking at the other, like if the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, governor is slightly above the Chief Justice, would continue to make slightly above the Chief Justice, makes slightly above the rest of the other judges, and, as you're looking at the judiciary and also the other elected officials, you kind of look at, there is a stratification there, and compared to the other elected officials. In state government, the governor does make more, but the scope of job, 8,000 employees versus, under 100 for all the elected governors, governor's offices governor's elected officials' offices are probably mostly less than 100, some are even smaller than that, if the auditor's the smallest. This is how we do it. This is the treatment that we've done in the past, and it keeps salaries consistent with what's happening with the rest of the folks.
Senator Vyhoski?
I certainly appreciate, just doing a quick Google search, it looks like the average salary for a state chief justice in 2021 was 280,000. So compared to 70,000 for the governor of Maine, it seems like other states don't necessarily track that way. And if we're comparing to other elected officials, I think it's really important to talk about general assembly and the lack of benefits and lack of livable wages and pay. And so it's tough to sit and look at a well above average, second highest potentially in the country, pay for the chief executive officer while they work in the lowest paid general assemblies. And so I guess I wonder in pay consideration how you square with that.
Well, I know that's something that this committee and you in particular have been advocating for over the past, certainly the past 2 years. And as you've mentioned, it's very hard to attract young people or people who don't have independent means to participate in the state legislature because of the lack of benefits and the pay. So.
Okay.
Senator Watson?
Thank you. On that point, I just want to be clear. So, part C, page 18, under the legislative branch, two values up there. I was just discussing with my.
I only printed out
here. Do you happen to know, maybe this is, I guess, for everybody in the room, do you happen to know if the values that are cited there are 6.4% and 5.4% increases, or are they just the 4.5 and 3.5 since you don't get steps?
Oh,
They're the full 6.4.
Okay,
6.4.
thank you.
Thank you.
And this is for all legislative branch employees, so this would include staff.
The staff, it doesn't apply to us too.
Correct.
And that's not so.
It does.
Oh.
So,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
there you
we'll go
go.
up to like
You're running.
$1.49.
Yeah. So, okay. Can I just clarify? So steps are for whom versus the 6.4% increase, which is what I was referring to compared to the 3%, but it's sort of the mandate that we're getting everybody.
Steps are part of the pay plan, the classified pay plans.
So that's for only classified employees.
Some exempt positions have step plans as well, or have some sort of levels to them, but the majority do not. So we have exempts who follow the classified pay plan, we have exempts who don't have a pay plan, we have exempts with their own pay plan. Yes, so But when we talk about status, what we're really looking at are the value of status for the majority of the workforce there, which is the classified workforce.
And what percent are classified versus exempt?
That workforce report.
Oh, right, your
It's-
fabulous workforce report,
In excess of 80%,
80% are
in
classified.
excess.
This is your committee, that's your committee copy.
Okay, good, we love this report.
That's exactly cool.
It's okay that it gives us a good sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. I think we're gonna move on. And if you're able to hang out, or do you need to leave?
I think a year, certainly for a little bit longer, I'm
Okay.
not until the wee hours, but.
No, we're not going into the wee hours. Don't worry. I just want to get through
Oh, the
this.
house looks like it is.
They may be there.
And
No,
I,
Most of
You always
them.
remember them.
yeah.
That's, I can't.
So-
They're gonna be there for a while.
Terry, are you
I
able
was saying that, I was
to?
like, how did you know?
Are you able to?
It's
Okay,
over
because
30.
Annie Noonan joined us because she heard the questions that were related to states attorneys and sheriffs. So do you mind if I go to her? Okay, great. Annie. Are you there, Annie?
Hi, Annie Noonan.
We cannot hear or see. Oh, we can see you. Awesome. We can't hear you yet. Maybe your headphones? No,
You're muted
now
now.
you're muted. Unmute, maybe we got you.
No,
No? Oh, darn.
I thought I heard her for a second. Maybe I imagined.
But actually, I like her.
Just come on over.
Actually, two different things.
Upstairs.
I mean, whenever this happens to me, my go-to is always leave and come back.
Yes.
Yeah,
leave it at
okay.
that.
We're gonna, okay, then we are gonna go to Terry and then we'll come back to you, Annie. Thank you.
Actually, I can say that I worked with Annie on the numbers for the state's attorneys and sheriffs that are integrated into this bill.
Yeah, we know they're integrated into the bill.
Right.
We know that, but we had specific questions, so I think it will be best to hear from Annie. But Annie, why don't you leave and come back and we'll take Terry. So, do you wanna come on up, Terry?
Carol, you just said something, but I thought the state's attorneys aren't part of the executive branch.
For the purposes of this, we put them in the executive.
Okay,
branch.
just arbitrary.
Well,
Well, it's
just the
clear.
Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs exists solely to
Oh,
create a
right,
single
of course.
point of appropriation.
Got it, just for,
Thank you, Joe.
no, that, it's like, what?
All right, okay. Hi, Terry. Thank you for your patience.
My pleasure. Terry Corson, State Court Administrator, and also with Chief, Greg Mosley, who's the Chief of Finance
Oh, great.
Administration of the Judiciary. Who definitely knows.
Hi.
Hello.
Nice to
Yeah.
see you. And you heard our introduction, so we'll,
Yes.
okay, awesome.
Yes. And thank you, and we.
If you wanna come up and sit with Terry, you can.
Bob's gone today.
And we didn't know what in particular you might like us to address. We also support Pay Act and very much appreciate the committee's consideration. We didn't come prepared to go into detail other than that these figures reflect what we had submitted and what we understand for the personnel that's involved.
Okay.
It's accurate.
And I think I had a question about that's great. I had a question about the assistant judges and I'm not sure, because they're a little different in here than the
Yes.
others. And, I'm trying to get to the page that they're on.
You're on page 10,
Okay.
and it looks like it's paid by the day.
Do you, can you explain why they're different and how this ends up working out in reality?
So I believe there's only one county where assistant judges work full-time, that's Chittenden County.
Okay,
And so in the other counties, they're kind of prorated based on the hours that they'll work, but they're paid at the equivalent day rate.
okay. And so this is for only when they're working in their capacity as an assistant judge, not in their capacity as a county executive?
Correct.
And that when they're in their capacity as a county executive, they're paid by the county? Is that correct?
It's actually the reverse, if I understand correctly, which is surprising.
Okay.
Yeah. If they're, covering their, work as assistant judges in the county in their official duties, then they're paid actually by the state. That's,
No,
and then if they sit as an assistant judge, that's when they're paid by the county,
Oh,
which is to me the reverse of what it would,
that doesn't look right.
okay.
That's odd.
They're essentially, they're classified as temporary employees of the judiciary. So
Okay.
we have, that must be what, 28 temps that are essentially assistant judges.
so if they are not sitting in court, here working next to a judge,
We should check that, because I don't, right.
Well, I've always thought it was the reverse, but that's how it has been.
oh,
The language?
Yeah.
wait, is it in current law that you're reading? That,
Yeah.
Or
I'm
street
reading it
light
now.
says that.
Well, it's in section B, when so the paid by the county at the state rate established in subdivision A when an assistant judge is sitting with presiding judge in a civil family division. This came about when there was an issue about their rate of pay. And I remember looking at it and saying, this is the opposite of what you would expect, but that's how it has always been, from what I understand. And then when they're sitting in their, I'm gonna say in their administrative capacity, overseeing the county functions, that's when they, okay, actually by the state.
When they're sitting on the bench there's a judicial officer on the bench, you don't, the county pays for that. They're not sitting, adjudicating that case.
Okay, that's when they're paid by the county, sitting with the presiding judge.
Yeah,
oh, so this is only when they're sitting alone.
yes.
For there's a few assistant judges that are trained to be able to do
Yes.
certain types of cases on their
Some
own.
Judicial,
No longer small claims.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what it is, but we did hear that about that.
Traffic court.
Uncontested
Yeah.
divorces in judicial bureau.
Right,
So
that's
if they
right.
join a judicial officer, for example, a civil trial, they're not paid by the state.
Paid by the county.
Yes.
Okay, so this is only for when they're sitting by themselves, hearing a case without another judge with them.
Correct.
Okay, so that it's almost like, or maybe it is in actuality, they're the presiding judge. Because there's nobody else there, and so they get this daily rate.
Yeah.
And in no other case does the judiciary pay them, everything else comes from the county.
Even
If
when
they're,
they're
what-
assistant.
Senator, can I ask a question? So when they are sitting with another judge, or when they're doing the books for the county pays them,
Yes.
okay? So,
That's because we wouldn't want to encourage them to sit on civil cases and then drive up our costs if we don't need them to be adjudicating that case.
okay, so does the presiding judge ask them to sit with them, or who determines when there's gonna be an assistant judge there?
It's
The assistant judge's discretion.
Oh, so
And some sit fairly regularly, some sit rarely.
I see. So what you're saying is you didn't want it to be like, oh, well, I'll sit regularly, so I get paid more from the state. So I see. Okay. So really the proportion of their pay that comes from the state is very small.
In most counties, that's correct.
And if they are not in good standing with the Supreme Court, for whatever reason, you wouldn't allow them to sit in a case by themselves, I'm
Right, the
assuming.
chief superior judge would determine when they can sit alone, if you will.
Uh-huh.
Judicial bureau or uncontested divorces. I think those are the only two categories.
So if they are not in good standing with the court, they would not get this pay because they would be asked to sit alone.
That's my understanding. I can confirm that with Judge Zona.
That would be great if we could
Yeah.
get that confirmed. I mean, it seems like that's the case, but that would be great to know. But in the other cases, even if they're not in good standing with the court, can they still sit as an assistant judge next to the superior judge, or would the superior judge say, no, you can't be here because you're not in good standing?
I think the judicial conduct board actually would determine that, whether or not, for example, they might be suspended or removed.
And if the judicial conduct board did suspend or remove them, would they be told you can't sit even as a side judge?
I can also clarify.
That would be great.
I assume so.
Okay. Okay, that would be great.
Okay,
And then probate judges, is their salary 100% state or is that county?
Chittenden County is the only full-time probate judge, if I understand, and then the rest are based, they're part-time judges. Based on a formula that I think was devised some years ago, maybe at the time of the restructuring, looking at residential volume of cases, per county.
So this amount that is in here right now, so I'll just pick on my own county, the 2024 76,555, is that a part-time amount or is that the full-time amount that's prorated?
That's part-time amount.
This is the part-time amount, so only Chittenden County is full-time,
Right.
Correct.
okay. Okay, and if they're not in good standing with the court, with the Supreme Court, they don't get to sit in a case at all, they're removed from the bench, is that correct?
You're on financial topics.
Yeah, I know.
There.
It's relevant though to their salary, so I'm just
Right,
curious.
and I would think with the judicial conduct,
Or the judicial conduct board, so
Right.
yeah,
And that did come up, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
with a probate judge who was suspended.
exactly,
And then there was some question, they ended up withdrawing from even running.
right.
So,
But there was this period where they were not allowed to hear cases, but they were still getting, were they still getting paid? That's a question. So if you wouldn't mind researching.
I'll get clarified on
That would be one.
I think it was addressed, but I honestly don't remember the details about how it was resolved, but that was definitely the issue.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. That would be
Okay.
great to understand how the pay worked in those cases.
Okay,
Okay, and also with the assistant judges if they're, okay. Senator Bihowski.
So this, I'm just trying to understand, and it may sort of be belaboring the same point. So in this instance, if the judge, the assistant judge or the judge isn't asked to sit, they don't get paid. So if they were suspended, they're not getting any pay. Am I missing something, or is that the case?
they may well get paid by the county for their county duties, if you will, in terms of sitting on the bench. They don't get paid for whatever time they're actually sitting on the bench.
Okay, thank you.
And there's a minimum, I think, 2 hours, and then it's even an hourly rate, so the daily rate would only be if they work for the entire day.
Okay.
And that's just when they're hearing cases on their own. So,
The judicial bureau.
Right, and I don't know what the county rate of pay is when they're sitting as a side judge.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that I don't know.
okay. Senator Clarkson, do you have a question?
Yeah, just because I've always heard that being a side judge is a pretty good gig. And it's interesting, it's sort of like the sheriffs, it's kind of cobbled together through a number of different
The
pockets.
county budget, and it's sub the county budget.
Right, which is one of the least, I mean, I'm sure it's transparent, it's just none of us tend to pay as much attention to it as we should.
And I think they might, for example, get benefits from the county budget office.
But they're not part of your benefits package, no, not at this
No.
daily rate.
No.
What about the probation? Do they get the state benefits?
I don't
Yeah,
think so.
okay. This is very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there any, Senator Bihowski?
And the probate judges, if for some reason one of them was not in good standing with the judicial board, is that right? Fine.
Judicial conduct board.
Nope, okay. Would they still be entitled to their full salary?
That's what I'm gonna research.
Okay,
yeah.
I mean, that question did come up.
Yeah.
But I don't remember exactly what.
I don't know for sure, but I think they did not get paid, and the probate judge from a nearby county covered the cases.
That's what
After a certain point in time, though.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
the issue, I think, arose to the surface.
Yeah. If we could just get clarity, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for the judiciary when it comes to salary? Does the I'll ask you the same question I was asking the executive branch. Does the judiciary ever do sort of salary studies to see if you're paying your judges?
I do know that there's a nationwide informal survey that we're asked to submit our judge figures to.
Uh-huh.
And my recollection is that nationwide, we're probably in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
So when you factor in cost of living, we're lower.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Because there's a higher cost of living, at least according to this chart for the judges. So I'm gonna say middle of the pack, and then you factor in cost of living, we're paid less than the middle of the pack.
Do you have that chart? Is that something you could share with us?
I'm sure, so it's something that the National Center for State Courts does, that I know I've gotten. and
Okay.
We haven't forwarded on.
We can, do you wanna Google that?
Well, I can Google it, but my very brief Google also sort of showed our judges roughly kind of in the pack.
Okay.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is also, if you're doing what Terry's talking about, and taking into consideration the cost of living here, then it becomes lower. So,
Yes.
of course, this is why everyone in New York is paid so much more, because the cost of living is so high. So why are we not then adequately compensating people for the cost of additional cost?
I mean, I hear you, but when we have the average for lunch or, making $45,000-$50,000 a year, I don't know that.
Should be in the high fifties.
And I'm thinking, that was an improvement over, say, 20 years ago when we were at the lower end, and I'm not sure. Maybe, because normally the amount increases by whatever the executive branch amount is, and maybe in the other states it's done differently.
Yeah,
So I think it has made it, it's improved.
yeah, I do think, I'm just speculating here, but I think it's probably done differently in other states. I think it's unique that we have sort of everybody gets the same
Oh,
increase, and I mean,
Yeah.
and it's all three branches, all positions sort of get the same. It seems a little odd to me, but
But also kind of nice, actually. I think it's.
So.
Yeah, go ahead.
Some states are unified like Vermont, so the administration is from the state, so that's where you get the consistent salaries. In many states, especially bigger states, are county based.
yes. Senator Yoski.
Also, I think there's something to be said for thinking about progressive increases. If you make $250,000 a year, 6.4% is a much larger percent, like the just dollar amount, and you need it less than someone, say, starting out that were really struggling to recruit. So I do think there's something to be said, and I don't know if studies have been out there about a curve, really looking at like, how are we bolstering people coming into the field who are struggling the most? And maybe freeing up those funds from people maybe at the higher end of their field who make plenty to live comfortably and would have a much larger increase just because that's how percentages work.
Math.
Not my strong suit, but I can do that.
All right, well, thank you both very much. It was nice to meet you. Thanks for
I
coming
know
as always.
email you the.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. You
Okay.
can email me
Right.
and Olivia, and then I'll share.
Okay, great.
Annie, we're gonna try you again. Are you?
Okay,
Oh,
you hear me?
we can hear you. We can't see you yet, but we heard you.
okay. I don't see how to turn this camera. Maybe is Olivia able to turn it on?
Olivia's fine.
Start my video. Here we go.
Yay! Magic.
Sorry.
Do it.
Sorry, you get
Start
to look at my wild, crazy hair today. Sorry,
No,
guys.
your hair looks lovely. Your hair.
This is wild and crazy.
So
So-
That is so not wow, it's
So- Annie, well, first introduce yourself for the record, but you did
Yes.
hear some of the questions because I got little sticky notes from Olivia that you were calling in with answers, so that's why I asked you to join us.
Great, thank you. For the record, Annie Noonan, Department of State's Attorney's Labor Relations and Operations Director. Thank you for cluing me into this today. I appreciate it. So just to go to the questions that were being asked, so that state attorneys, the 14 elected state's attorneys, their salaries are statutorily set. The salary right now for a state's attorney is, and it's all the same. I saw that you were asking about, is there any variation on the, such as for like a secretary of an agency or a commissioner where they can get up to 50% more? No, it is a straight set salary. It's $132,148, except that Chittenden County State's Attorney Sarah George receives slightly more than that. So as opposed to the 132 and change, Sarah receives 138. Part-time state's attorneys, which are in Essex County and Grand Isle counties, which are State's Attorney Aluzi and DeSabato, they receive $99,100. And the theory being that their caseload is substantially less and that they are also permitted to take on other work as part-time state's attorneys. Similarly, the sheriffs are also statutorily set. Their salary is now at $97,754, except that Chittenden County State's Sheriff Dan Gamlin is 103,000 and change. And Grand Isle Sheriff Ray Allen is at 87,000 and change. And that is because Ray Allen is a level 2. And if you remember, we've talked about this before, any sheriff who is not level 3 certified has to take a 10% cut. We've also talked about what would we do if we have someone who is not certified whatsoever. So there is that variation in the statute that was written in many years ago, I suspect. A little bit about our bargaining. We also bargain with the SCA, and we have 2 bargaining units. We have the state's attorney's offices, and we have the state transport deputies. So the state's attorney's office staff include the deputy state's attorney, the victim advocates, our legal assistants, administrative support staff. We are on our third 2-year contracts. We will be on July 1st in our third 2-year contract with the state's attorney's office staff. I shouldn't say this because I'll jinx myself in the department, but we've been very fortunate in that we've been able to settle all of those contracts without having to go to mediation or fact finding. That doesn't necessarily mean that we have any special formula or magic. It was just that I think that it just worked out that way. We've had very collaborative negotiations. And I think also the fact that we have limited numbers of position titles also helps. So, some departments and in the executive branch have dozens of titles with dozens of competing interests. We're a really small operation. We have 60 deputy state's attorneys, 28 victim advocates, and 31 administrative staff. You're talking a small group of people. And similarly with the transport deputies, there's only 24 of them, and they all have the same job title. And, our biggest challenge there was really to try to make sure that that the sheriffs were aware of collective bargaining and what their rights would be under a contract and all of that. But we had our first contract with them last year, which was a 1-year contract because we wanted to get them on the 2-year cycle of the executive branch. Our settlements have almost, in terms of salary, have matched almost exactly to the executive branch settlements in most of those years. There was a pay equity settlement in the first year of the state's attorney's offices that because of some compression issues, it involved some issues with people who had not been part of some legislative fix that went through years ago that I think was kind of popped on both DHR and the department years ago. But that had a little bit of extra money attached to it, but it brought everybody to where they thought they should be. We've been very lucky. So our bargaining this year, so our state's attorney's contract is settled. So I can say very specifically, it's at the 4.5% and 3.5% the executive branch settlement. Our state transport deputies, we have had two negotiations. We're finishing up hopefully on Monday, but we have agreed on the money at 4.5 and 3.5. So what that allowed us to do, and I want to give just tremendous shout out to Harold Schwartz, who I see sitting in the room, who has done our pay act for this department since as far as I've been there, with the department here for years. And Harold is fastidious. I don't know if you've worked with Harold much. I've worked with Harold now for probably 4 decades. I also see John Berard. I've worked with John for decades. Harold gives us great guidance, direction in terms of putting our numbers together, and we go back and forth about what we think we've come up with. He's running numbers from what I would call the very large data set that he has over at the Department of Human Resources. So he's able to check our numbers. And when we get an email from Harold that says, "Good job, we're together, I think we're all together on this," we breathe a huge sigh of relief because, frankly, he has a very unenviable task to do that. John Berard's got the unenviable task of bargaining, and then Harold's got to pull it all together. Part of the reason we bargain separately is because of the Vermont Supreme Court decision called In Re Election, which I think we've talked about this before, which basically said, all of you people are county employees. A bit of a stretch. We could talk about that for hours. I think DHR and I are on the same page. I won't bore you with that. But in essence, that's why we negotiate with separately. But again, 2 bargaining units. We bargain with the SEA. We've been very fortunate. Our pay act numbers are in through Harold, I hope. And that's where we are at in terms of we're glad to be done the process and have you looking at this pay act number. I will say pay act, supporting the pay act funding is super important for the departments. You know, supporting the pay act in whole is critical when it's supported either, and I've been around, as you know, this process, the pay act process, since 1980. So when a pay act is not supported in whole, basically what happens is departments then have to figure out how to fund that hole in their budget. So thank you for what you do. Support the pay act. I think you'll probably hear that from Commissioner Beth Vestigi, another great partner to our department. So we appreciate all of your efforts, and I'll stop talking.
Well, thank you, Annie. And yes, we've heard that from everybody. Everybody's consistent in that. And that's actually super refreshing because, as you know, that's not usually the case with bills.
That's for sure.
I just want to clarify. It was said earlier before you joined us that the money for your people is in the executive branch numbers.
Yes.
But I do just want clarity because you said you weren't completely done with the transport deputies. Are they also in there?
I gave Harold the numbers as an estimate, which actually landed correctly. So we estimated them at the same percentage increase for the 4.5 and 3.5. And even though we're not completely done that negotiation, we will probably be done on Monday, but that issue is done. We've agreed upon money with the SEA.
Okay, so they're included. Okay, good. So we don't have to add something. Okay, Senator Biehoski.
So I just have a couple of questions. So Grand Isle and Essex being part-time, they're part-time at 0.75 FTEs.
I don't think it's ever, I don't see any statutory language, Senator, that actually says what that term part-time means. So I would say that both State's Attorney Aluzzi and DeSabato, I would say, work what they need to work to stay up with their docket. But I don't think there's any, there's nothing that says in that terminology that a part-time state attorney worked 50% or 75%. There's nothing in the statute that says that.
Okay, that's helpful. The only reason I came to that is because the pay is 75% of the other pay. So I'm just trying to understand how that number was arrived at. I don't know if there is an answer or we don't really know.
I think it well predates me.
Okay.
So if there were legislative conversations on that, it well predates my tenure here with the department. I suspect it was many years ago.
That's helpful. Then, so my other question is, I'm sliding on my judiciary hat a little bit. Is there no court backlog in either of those counties? So I'm a little confused why we would have a part-time state's attorney if we have extensive court backlogs.
I don't have that chart in front of me, but it is done. And there is, I want to say, I don't believe that I don't think that any of the 14 counties are free of a backlog. So I think you're correct there. I can get you that is pretty much almost when I hang up. Tim has some information about clearance rates and how many cases they're each handling, and the offices, and Essex and Grand Isle are included in that. So I can get you that. But everyone has some backlog.
Yeah, I guess my question is just why wouldn't we increase for 25% increase, why wouldn't we increase those positions to full time to help clear the backlog? And maybe it's not that simple. It just seems like, in judiciary, we're talking about, 9 new state's attorneys or 30 or 9 not new state's attorneys. Hiring more deputy state's attorneys at a pretty significant cost when we have these 2 part-time state's attorneys that could do. Does my thinking make sense?
Well, sure. And one of the things I will point out is that Doug DeSabato from Grand Isle, for quite some time, he was going down to assist Franklin County. You might remember the brouhaha we had in Franklin County. I think everybody's quite aware of that. But Doug was going down to Franklin County to assist down there. And he also has been assisting in Lamoille County. They have, because of their backlog. So he's, it's often that he will raise his hand and say, where do you need me? I have some extra time. They don't have as many court dates and even scheduled court dates. The court folks in the room would tell you that. I see Terry sitting there. So they don't have as many court dates, but so Doug has often helped out. I suspect that, and I don't always know who's doing what, like who's helping out in other counties. I suspect Vince has probably helped out in other counties too. But it's a good question. Why did they decide that those two counties? Well, if you think about also the fact that Grand Isle County has grown, it's become a bit of a suburb to Burlington, correct? We all see that. So I don't know, maybe back then there was so little work that they thought part-time would suffice. And maybe it's probably a conversation worth having going forward next year.
Thank you. All right, maybe we put some language in about looking at that. When that Grand Isle State's attorney does do extra work, I'm assuming he gets paid for it, yes? Or is that just on his salary?
Well, I asked Doug, and with John and the executive committee's approval I asked Doug if he would keep sort of a record of his hours and all of that. Of course, travel we would reimburse at the 67 cents a mile. But I did ask that, and basically, I think what we did is we gave twice. We gave Doug what I would say a bonus for doing that. Well, because it was well beyond what would have been expected for a part-time state's attorney. It was a small amount for really what he was working on.
So that was when he was helping cover for Franklin?
For other counties,
Yeah, for Franklin.
yeah. Okay, Annie, this is really, really helpful. We're gonna have to move on, but if you're able to send over that chart.
I will
That'd be great.
Get right to it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yeah.
Have a good afternoon. Enjoy the sun before the snow comes tomorrow.
Annie's right here.
It's supposed to be 27.
Thank you, not for that piece, but for your testimony.
Bye, Annie.
Always a
Thank
pleasure.
you.
Could someone just tell Steve that we're ready for him?
I believe they're listening in.
Oh, Steve?
Steve who? Oh,
BSCA?
BSCA. Steve Howe.
Yeah. Real. Thank you very much. Hi,
Hello, Madam Chair.
you are our last witness, so.
Save the best for last.
Yes, absolutely. Sit down, join us, and tell us your perspective on this.
All right. Well, for the record, I'm Steve Howard. I'm the Executive Director of the Vermont State Employees Association, and I'm here with Gary Hoadley, who is our Director of Labor Relations, and our Chief Negotiator, and Gretchen Naylor, who is our Director of Field Services, and also the lead negotiator on the judiciary contract.
Excellent. Maybe we should introduce ourselves because neither of you have been in here before. We know Steve, but I'm Senator Ruth Hardy from the Addison District.
I'm Olivia Parker, I'm the committee assistant. Tanya helps the Chittenden Central District.
All right, Rebecca White in Windsor County District.
This would be Senator Bob Norris, but he had to leave the day. And I am Senator Ann Watson from the Washington District.
Allison Clarkson, Windsor County District. We've seen it.
All right, there you go.
So I have 4 or 5 pages I'm just going to read.
Okay. Please do that.
That'll help the comments, right?
Yes.
So members of the VSEA are very supportive of the Pay Act and are very happy that we were able to reach this agreement. As you know, you hear from me from time to time. As of today on the DHR dashboard, there's 1,072 vacancies. So this is, as I see it, is a good start, again, down payment on trying to make the state a more competitive employer in the state, trying to fill those vacancies, in particularly in this mission critical areas. You heard about judicial backlog, and I can go on and on with departments you've heard me talk about that are in a staffing crisis. But we think this agreement is a sound agreement and one that we hope that you will support and fund.
That was really fast forward to 5 pages. Are there any questions for Steve? And so could you actually submit something brief in writing, just for the record?
Sure.
That'd be great.
It's a rare moment. Oh, we have every month.
I know, it's kind of weird, and nice, very nice. Well, thank you. We are going to,
I have
there's a
one
question.
quick question, and so there are both bargained for things in the Pay Act and things that have really nothing to do with the VSA are not bargained for, correct?
In the Pay Act.
Yes.
Yes, so yes, the parts of the Pay Act that we care about are the the agreements that we have negotiated with the administration
Can
or
you
with the judiciary or with the.
give me like a super high level who that is?
Oh, sure.
Like not every single department,
Yeah.
but.
So we have, we negotiate with the three big executive branches, the corrections unit, the supervisors, and the NMU, non-management unit, which is the largest one. The Defender General, the judiciary, the Office of State's Attorneys, we are negotiating right now for the the state transport deputies. I think that's, did I miss anybody in the Pay Act? I think that's those are the units that are in the Pay Act.
And for the offices of the state's attorneys, those are just the deputies, state's attorneys and the administrative staff, not the actual state's attorneys.
Right.
So deputies.
Yeah, we would love, it's Senator Clarkson knows, at any moment, we would love to change the statute, negotiate on behalf of legislators, because certainly you are deserving of better compensation. We think we would be very happy with your union.
We're gonna need your help.
This is such nice space to us, they just feel bad for us at this point.
As you know, this is my favorite committee.
You're reminding me of.
So I asked the commissioner this and for like a document that is the signed agreement, is there not a document that is the agreement, or how do we get a chance to get a copy of whatever was actually agreed to?
I don't know that we have signed it yet. Have we signed it yet?
We had the agreements that were reached during negotiations, which some of which are handwritten, but we could.
We have this fancy system where John Berard sends me an email that I'm supposed to sign first, but of course I'm not gonna sign it until I see that Gary has signed it.
So we courtesy.
It takes a while.
I really need Gary's
We go back and forth. I said to Gary, should I sign this?
There's something for the record.
Oh, we'll get you
There's
something.
something on,
Yeah.
you know, right now, it's lovely to have everybody come in and say they support it, but it was just, and we have
Sure.
Bill, but just sort of what is the general
We'll
agreement?
do our best.
Thank you, Senator Clarkson.
So Harold said you brought the 80%, more than 80% of state government are classified employees. And of those you represent, you're negotiating in this Pay Act for how many employees?
Well, we have just, I'd say this, I'm gonna just roughly ballpark it. We have roughly 6,000 members, not all of those are in those units. And we have 1,700 plus or minus non-members of the VSEA who are also in those units for whom we negotiate, even though they are not members of the VSEA. So that's a ballpark figure. There's a couple hundred in the colleges that aren't included in these units. There's maybe another 100. Well, there's like maybe 50 in the housing authority. I mean, it's not 50.
Yeah.
And those aren't in the, so there's about, I would say 200,
That aren't
250
in this,
of that number who are not in any of these units.
thanks. For a total of like 4,500 or 5,000.
And how,
5,800.
right, it's around, I would say it's around, it's just under, I'd say 7,500 is a good ballpark number. Yeah, that's right.
Good, oh great, that just gives us a sense.
I mean, I don't do math in public because I didn't do math. I did civics.
All right, at that point, we're gonna, I think we're gonna be done for the day. We don't have possession of the bill, it's not actually even the bill yet, so trying to figure out what the process is and whether or not we're able to make any kind of tweaks to it. Not about what's been bargained, but other things on the side. So I will see if I can get more information and we'll discuss maybe tomorrow. Thanks,
Thank you,
Steve.
Madam Chair.
Thanks, everybody in the room for your work on this. It's really nice to see everybody in agreement. It makes our job easier. Thanks again, Andy, on this meeting.